Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Transitions to Adulthood Center for Research's on presentation with Dr. Vanessa Klodnik from Thresholds in Chicago. She's going to be covering the online learning community for supervisors of young adult peer mentors, as well as going over an introduction to the Young Adult Peer Mentor Supervision Guidebook. If you'd like to subscribe to the Transitions Center's email announcements, you can text to join at 22828, or you can go to our website at umassmed.edu transitionsacr and join our email listservs there. The Transitions Center's mission is to promote the full participation in socially valued roles of transition-age youth and young adults ages 14 to 30 with serious mental health conditions. We use the tools of research and knowledge translation in partnership with this at-risk population to achieve this mission. Those are our funders: Spark, UMass Medical School, SAMHSA, and the Department of Mental Health in Massachusetts have all funded this project. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Klodnik. Thank you.
Thanks, Dee. Good morning, everyone. We're going to skip this slide. I think it's important because we're talking about supervising young adults with lived experience in community mental health settings, that I talk a little bit about why I was attracted to this work and why I think it's the most exciting work I'm doing right now. And it's a really exciting time within the transition age youth mental health field to be thinking about youth and young adult peer mentoring and peer support and what that is. And I just am thrilled to have been a part of this amazing project through the Transition Center and Mass DMH to really build knowledge around effectively supervising young adults with lived experience in the role of young adult peer mentor. And so a little bit about me. I've got these photos on the side. The top one is me recently, maybe a couple of months ago, running in Chicago. I run a lot in order to manage my own mental health stuff. And I also am close. On the bottom picture, you can see there's me and my brother, Billy, who's actually had a fair bit of mental health challenges throughout his life. He is a vet, being part of the Marines previously and now in the Army National Guard. And that's us running the Chicago Marathon together in 2010 to raise money and awareness for people with serious mental health conditions and the huge disparities among access to affordable and effective care. And that's really what drives my work as a social justice element behind all of the practice stuff I'm going to talk about today. And then I'm a Cubs fan because I live in Chicago and I love the Cubs, not a White Sox fan. It's a really fun debate. If you're a Midwesterner and in the Chicagoland area, you have to choose a team. That's me and my daughter, Lucy, this last year posing. And we randomly posed below a little heart, which was really, really cute. And I'm taking time to tell you a little bit about me because that's really what we're asking young adult peer mentors to do, is to share little bits about themselves on the job, not always their experiences related directly to their mental health condition, but really about what they're going through currently, who they are, what they bring to the work. And we expect them to really do this, I hate the word natural, but naturally. We expect them just to come to the job. We train them on some storytelling techniques. And I think that it's exciting that we have young adults in these roles, but as supervisors, we have to be really thoughtful about what we're asking young adults. Really what is driving my approach and my thinking is that I am a clinical social worker by training, and I have experience developing a peer mentoring program in Chicago at Thresholds, which is where my home base is, in a project with the Transition Center a few years back, where we were trying to boost engagement of young adults in community mental health services, specifically vocational services, by integrating peer mentors. And man, was I blown away by my experiences of clinically and administratively supervising young adults in peer roles. And it's from that real lived experience that I went back to the literature, started talking to experts in transition age youth across the country, working closely with my colleague John Dallman at the Transition Center, and building what first is a toolkit, which I'll talk about in a moment, how to effectively integrate young adults into community mental health settings in peer roles. But then I recognize the need for just training and practice and support for supervisors, that supervisors of these unique roles have unique challenges. Also, what's really interesting and I think really wonderful about what I do is that I'm constantly taking practice and translating it into research. So all the research I do is very much heavily informed by what I'm partnering with and observing in the field. And then also I'm constantly in all of the work that I do, taking what we know from research and translating it into practice, which is just so much fun and is really at that is where this project is it where research and practice intersect, because there's very little research right now of young adult peer mentors and their impact on outcomes, and down the road we're going to hopefully have some of those studies lined up. I really do work very hard to partner with real world providers. Everything that I'm going to talk about today, everything I've developed has been influenced, refined, tweaked over time through real world conversations. In fact, I'm embedded within a mental health agency. And so every day I'm talking to administrators, direct practitioners, all sorts of different roles within Thresholds. And we have a large, thriving peer support sector here at Thresholds that heavily embraces the recovery movement and using strengths-based practice. And so I've been able to really leverage some of what we've done here in Chicago and bringing that to my work in Massachusetts. And then I just have to mention just all of the partners at UMass and other folks across the country, such as Sasha DeBruhl and Nev Jones, who've really influenced my thinking and helped push me to think about how do we really help support supervisors of young adult peers. So right now, I just wanted to mention this original recording was an online community, an online learning community. And so I always like to set intentions, and the folks for who this guidebook I've developed and for the online learning community, it's for supervisors of young adults in peer roles. Specifically, the role in Massachusetts is the young adult peer mentor role, but this is applicable far beyond. Today, we're really going to focus on the supervision guidebook. And so if you're watching this, there's some slides at the end of it, at the end of this slide deck, that have some great discussion questions and vignettes for you to use with your team and your colleagues that we won't get into today, but we're part of the online learning community recording that we did last week. And so these were some goals that I had for last week's online learning community. But I did want to tell you, Massachusetts folks, if you're listening to this and it's, January or February or early March of 2018, we have upcoming online learning communities for you to participate in. And the one on March 21st is really going to focus on navigating relational boundaries, which you'll learn shortly that I'm not a fan of that term boundaries. I really like the term building strong working alliances. And that also we're going to talk a lot about cultural attunement and responsiveness and how we do that. We'll also have some real life vignettes that I'll bring from my own experience and from our colleagues' experiences. And then we'll have another online learning community May 9th that will talk about strategic use of self in the work for young adult peer mentors and how you best support and supervise that work. And also how do you coach and model self-care as a supervisor. And we'll also, of course, have some vignettes, some real life supervision cases for us to kind of mull over in real time. Okay, so here are some amazing resources for you. And all of this is free online. A lot of it is coming out of Massachusetts, but if you're, elsewhere in the country, you can go and look at this stuff and use it. There's this awesome website, the CBH Knowledge Center. You can go here, and what's here is this incredible resource. And this is coming out of a system of care grant through Mass DMH, where they developed, it's called the STAY Project. It just is coming to an end this year. They developed this young adult peer mentoring practice profile. And what a practice profile is it breaks down what are the core practices of young adult peer mentoring. And there are 6 core practices. My supervision guidebook really aims to support folks in using these practices. We want to say to get practice to ideal, so moving from maybe not doing it so well, to doing it okay, to doing it really, really, really well. And what's great about the practice profiles, it helps supervisors to understand what on earth should young adult peer mentors really be doing. Also, what's on this website is there's tons of webinars, there's activities, there's the toolkit for effectively employing young adult peer providers, which John Dahlman was the champion author of, and he invited me to help really think through the supervision piece and how we best do this. I've had a lot of fun developing this, and this has gotten a lot of traction nationally. There's a PDF version of it, but there's also an online version that you can click through the different sections. There is sections about how do you hire the right young adult peer mentors, how do you attract the right young adult peer mentors, how do you work with effective accommodations with young adult peer mentors on the job, how do you really help an organization become culturally attuned to young adult peers in policy, in structure, in systems, and in practice. And it is just an incredible resource. So definitely check that out as well. And so to introduce my supervision guidebook, I have to lay, I guess, because I am a researcher at heart and love theory, you can thank University of Chicago for that. I have to really just say that the reason behind all of this, like why even care about supervisors, is because unique roles, a unique role of young adult peer mentoring demands unique support and maybe training too, I might argue. And in fact, just to illustrate this, and I hope this makes sense, I love pictures and diagrams to illustrate things, so I hope this makes sense. We have this young adult peer mentor role, and it's a young adult with these lived mental health experiences, or just lived experiences of being a young adult in real time, and actually, knowing what it's like to be a young adult, and being able to advocate and share with a team what it's like to be a young adult. And then we've got these clients that are also youth and young adults. And in Massachusetts, their age is roughly 14 to 21. The young adult peer mentors are usually over 18, but are typically in their 20s, but also could be older. That's also what's fun, is to think about what does it mean to be a peer. We're not going to get into that a lot today. That could take another entire webinar, whole day, think tank to get there. But what's interesting is the supervisor has this really unique role of managing or facilitating or supporting, you pick your word, this interaction that young adult peer mentors are having with their clients, and arguably with their colleagues and other agency stakeholders or external stakeholders, like who refers young people to your agency. And so a clinical supervisor, just a supervisor in general, who's overseeing the work of a young adult peer mentor, is not just helping to develop a young adult peer mentor. And that's one of my practice principles, is as a supervisor, you have to take a step back and always be thoughtful about your role as a developer. You're helping develop and instill skills and confidence and competence and role modeling. And to do that as a supervisor, you can dig into your own toolkit and your own experiences, but it's important to have that developmental framework. But you also don't want to turn young adult peer mentors into a bunch of therapists and make them super clinical. That is not your role. And a lot of people that step into the supervisor role are clinical folks. So anyways, this is my attempt to really highlight young adult peer mentors are usually young adults, not always, but they usually are in that transition to adulthood phase that comes with instability, lots of instability. That's what being an adult is. It's experiencing instability and opportunity and possibility across multiple life domains. So work, school, relationships, living situation, identity, goals across all these domains. All of those things are very unstable, and that's normal. And then you have a bunch of clients who are also in that same phase, and you're helping to facilitate this mutually beneficial alliance between clients and young adult peer mentors. And I think it's really unique, and I think it demands a unique supervisory approach. Now, here are the 6 core practices of the young adult peer mentor role in Massachusetts, and I think that they are spot on. These were developed in true partnership with young adults in the peer mentor role over a long time, over years of fleshing out and discussing what are we doing, examining the role, reflecting on it. And this is what has been developed and what the practice profile is that the role of an adult peer mentor is really practicing cultural responsiveness. And so you as a supervisor have to ask, well, how do I support a young adult peer to do that? How do I also, with the next core element, how do I help a young adult peer mentor build relationships and collaborate effectively? How do I help a young adult peer mentor to really connect with their clients, but also help support these young people, these clients, to really develop their vision for their own future? How do I help young adult peer mentors role model? How am I a role model as a supervisor? Because guess what? As a supervisor, you're going to role model. How do I promote self-care? Because as a supervisor, if you can role model good self-care practices and integrate that into just your practice as a supervisor, and into your individual supervision meetings with your young adult peer mentors, your young adult peer mentors will actually begin to practice self-care on the job. And then they might actually talk about it with their clients. And that's cool. They can help their clients practice some self-care. That's like a win-win-win for everyone. And also, I think what is so important, and probably the spot or the place where supervisors start to get a little bit like, how do I ensure that young adults are professional? And what is professionalism? And how can I help young adults who are in peer roles co-define professionalism? How can we redefine professionalism? Because a lot of, to be honest here, I'm being honest and transparent, a lot of community mental health organizations that I've worked with and consulted with across the country, especially if they're on the adult side, or even if they're on the child side, they don't get transition age youth culture. And the idea of professionalism just looks different. And so as a supervisor, you can end up like really challenging some of what is just accepted culture, accepted how we do things, which is why I think being a supervisor is so much fun. It's amazing. Most fun. Oh, I have all these cute things, and these are from Massachusetts Young Adult Peer Mentoring Practice Profile. I'm sorry I did not integrate these, but again, these pictures are in the practice profile. Becoming aware of these will help you to navigate that practice profile. So as a supervisor, as I've alluded to, is you become really a facilitator of young adult mentors' learning skills and also self-awareness on the job. Young adult peer mentors haven't gone through a master's level training program where they've had to do tons and tons of self-examination. However, many of them have gone through mental health treatment and had to self-examine themselves, and so they've done a little bit of that. But your job as a supervisor is going to have to be thoughtful about, okay, how am I practicing professionalism? When am I feeling uncomfortable? And really reflecting and processing and gaining in order to gain self-awareness on the job. You also, if you like it or not, you become a champion and advocate for the role of young adult peer mentors within your context, within your agency, and within your community. It happens. I did not expect this to be a role where I would have to over and over explain the value, the benefit, how exciting it is to integrate young adult peers into an agency. But it's true, you become an advocate in a variety of ways. You also become a natural partner between departments. You end up having to really partner with your talent management or HR department. You end up partnering with administration, partnering across departments. If there's a vocational department, you end up working with them. Your intake department, learning like how can young adult peers really help inform that process. You end up partnering a lot within your agency and beyond. And as I've probably already said, you end up role modeling a lot. And that takes, as a supervisor, you having to really check yourself and reflect on your own practice and who you are on the job, and you having your own vision for supervision, which I think is like hard for us when we're working with transition age youth, because there's a lot of crisis and we're really busy and our caseloads are really high, and there's often not time for us to get the kind of supervision we need as supervisors. And so you're going to have to do that so you can be a great role model and coach. And one thing that I think is different, because everything I've said up until now, especially on this slide, is applicable beyond working with young people with lived experiences. But I think especially when you're working with young people who maybe this is their first like professional gig, that you have to just remain really attuned to their well-being. And how you do this is you develop a really strong working alliance with them, like you would your young people and your families that you work with. You have to be really thoughtful about that, and then staying attuned to, wow, seems like Joe is really acting a little bit different. I'm going to check in with him about that. And being proactive is really, really important, especially when peer mentors are new to the role, because they're not used to perhaps be like sharing when they're feeling uncomfortable or feeling like they're not doing a good job. That's not what people do beyond like social work and counseling professions. They don't come to their supervisor and be like, gosh, I'm really struggling with this. Can you help me out? It's very different to introduce like reflection and supervision into this. And of course, you probably are thinking at this point, like, oh my God, it's going to turn into therapy. But we'll get to this briefly shortly. In the guidebook, there's a lot of pointers. There's a whole section on like, how do you prevent, and be really clear about like how this isn't therapy, how it might look like therapy, and how that's okay. And so that's definitely in the guidebook. And then the crux of this, and in Massachusetts, God bless Massachusetts, y'all are awesome, really using reflective supervision. That is a thing. It is a practice coming out of our early childhood field, where we're really being thoughtful about who we are in our practice, and being thoughtful about what is my role in this relationship building, and in every interaction I have with my clients and their families, reflecting on that and what it means and how I am playing a role in this, and being careful not to be like, oh, they're not doing this, I'm having a role with this. Reflective supervision is amazing. I have resources for that in this guidebook. Okay, so introducing the guidebook, it looks like this. It's about 90 pages, but don't freak out. It is primarily activities and exercises that could be applied for training purposes, but I really think that a lot of the exercises are awesome for you to integrate into your weekly supervision. Ideally, if you could integrate it into, if you have group supervision, you have multiple young adult peers that you could get together on a regular basis. Maybe you do individual supervision every week, and maybe every other week or once a month you have a group supervision and you integrate some of these interactive activities. So super important. Well, quickly, the guidebook is really designed to help supervisors to do a really, really great job with supervising young adult peer mentors. And we really want young adult peer mentors to experience on-the-job success. We want them to be successful, and so we have to take a slightly different approach to our supervision to do this. And we also want to reach the ideal practice across those 6 core practice elements that make up peer mentoring. Quickly, what informed the supervision guidebook is really you. Like supervisors I have talked to across the country, young adults in peer roles, I've talked to experts in transition age youth that are working on a variety of different projects. All sorts of folks have helped, real world practitioners have helped to inform this guidebook. And so thank you. I am so thankful that this is even a thing, and it's taken years to get it to this place. And really, it was developed out of a need for tools, for actual things that are useful to practitioners who lead very, very busy on-the-job lives and are trying to supervise arguably a really unique and challenging role. And so the best way to access this guide, and I'm trying to make this super, super simple, is you could download it here. So here's a really lengthy, you can just copy and paste this into your web browser, and it's in PDF. Or you can go to the CBH Young Adult Peer Mentoring website, and here's the website address for that. And then you click at the bottom of the page, when you scroll down, there's this cute icon that's tools and resources. You click on that. And then you click on, this is what the website looks like actually. So it's that website. And then you're gonna click on this peer supervision, peer support, for supervisor support for peer support providers. And that is gonna be super helpful to you, and it's gonna get you to the supervision guidebook and all the exercises. How it's set up, well, here's a huge list of what is in it. And I'm just telling you this, I'm just showing you this, like flashing it for you, to show you there's a ton of stuff in it. It's definitely worth, as a supervisor, skimming through it, especially the first 2 chapters that are really on like what are the philosophy and principles and how to use the practice profile. 2 things to look for throughout the guidebook. is this little icon that is like a rewind and pause button. And that is your reflection activity for you to do individually as a supervisor, or in dream world, if you had a supervision group you went to with other supervisors who supervised young adults with lived experience and peer provider roles, that you guys could use these to really reflect on the practice and what it is to supervise young adult peers. And I'll have some examples of what those look like coming up. And then there are these activities, these supervision activities that you can integrate into your supervision practice. And they're really interactive. They're meant for you to bring in, not necessarily as a worksheet. Young people don't love worksheets, but of course these are set up as worksheet sort of looking things. But it's for you to be like, oh, there's this exercise I can do. Here's the discussion questions I can bring in. Here's the vignette I can do, or here's the setup I need. And I think that this is the kind of stuff that is easy to do. It allows you a system as a supervisor to integrate things so you know you're covering your bases in order to really effectively develop young adult peers. Okay, so here's the start. The first section of the guidebook is called Effective Young Adult Peer Supervision Philosophy, and it starts out with just the principles and goals of effective supervision, and it's really just to orient you to like, why would I care to like really be focused so much on doing something slightly different for this for young adult peers, and why do I have to work on myself? Like, why? It also gets into why supervision can maybe feel like therapy and maybe why that's not a terrible thing. In fact, we want young adult peer mentors to come to us and be like, my gosh, I just feel like I screwed up on that. And I feel like I've got like, weird feelings about this, relationship I have with this one client and their mom said this. We want young adult peers to come to you and tell you what's up and tell them how they feel about it. And so that's part of what it could feel a little bit like therapy. But it's your job as a supervisor to always ask, like, oh, hey, what is this really about? Is this really about on-the-job stuff and working with clients? Or is this like processing stuff like that these young adult peers are like going on in their own professional lives? And yes, that can get murky when you're trying to help young adult peer mentors develop their stories and to identify in their current real life, where they might be experiencing some resiliency. So you might be asking them to process some of their own lived experience in their real life outside the job. And that's okay. That's good. We want to help young adult peers to really pull in what they're going through and their own stories and their own experiences into their work with their clients. But so there's some reflection exercises. And this is, when you look to the right of the screen, you can see this is what a typical type of like a bullet pointed list of some information and then an exercise. So here's one of those stop and reflect as a supervisor exercise. Then the next section gets into how do you really leverage this practice profile. So there's these like core practices, there's 6 of them. And the way that I've conceptualized this and been thinking about it and would love feedback on is really integrating a young adult development plan and also coming up with a clear plan that you evaluate regularly on keeping supervision sacred. And I've included a form for this. It looks like this. Here's my supervision session guidance form. And depending on your agency and context, sometimes you'll have a form that's used. And this is something you could integrate and being really reflective about your role and what you're working on and the young adult peers role and what they're working on. It's all in the guidebook. But also here's an example of an activity that's in the guidebook that you could do every quarter, where you help young adult peers to reflect on maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of the core elements of the practice profile and be like, gosh, how have I done this? And then you bring the practice profile into supervision, you're reviewing it in real time, you're being like, hey, let's talk about an example of a client where you've like practiced cultural attunement, or you've helped them to like maybe think through their vision of their future, or you've helped them or you've demonstrated really great professional behavior, and maybe where are some areas for growth opportunities and where can we set some goals around that. So that's the second section. Then it gets into, there's now the 6 following sections around each of the core practice profile domains. The first one is practicing cultural responsiveness. And so there are some kind of tips for you as a supervisor, and then reflective exercises, as you can see in this. But then there's also activities for you to do in your supervision practice around helping young adult peers to gain self-awareness. Then moving into the second domain, we get into really building relationships and collaboration. And this is where mutuality is such an important thing. I could talk for like a really long time about what is mutuality, how do you as a supervisor think about it, put brackets on it, foster it. And this is something in the guidebook where there's a little bit of writing on, what is mutuality? How can I understand it? And then really leveraging this idea of the working alliance, which I think we're all trained in, but it can be really, really helpful on a variety of levels, that if you as a supervisor can develop a really strong working alliance with your young adult peer mentors, you've got your goals are aligned, your tasks are aligned, your bond is strong, that your young adult peer mentors are going to come to you with stuff that they're struggling with. And you're also going to help them then to build strong working alliances with their clients, just because you're modeling good relationship building in your supervision practice. Also, what's in this section is exercises and key practices around supporting disruption and addressing microaggressions, because guess what? Young adult peers in these roles, I swear to you, if you're new to this practice, or I'm sure you're nodding your head if you've been implementing young adults in peer roles at your agency as a new practice, it is interesting. The context sometimes rejects young adult in peer roles. It's really an interesting thing. It happens for a variety of reasons. I'm working on some research to better understand why and how this happens and how we can mitigate this. But definitely there's some reflective exercises for you as a supervisor to think about, how can I address microaggressions that happen in real time? How can I prevent them from happening as well? The third domain and third section is supporting young adult vision and goals. This is where we really get into stuff that you probably already know as a supervisor, but you're going to purposefully integrate it into your supervision practice around active listening and motivational interviewing. I have a bunch of exercises on this that you can integrate into your supervision practice. The next section is on role modeling, and this really gets into like leveraging lived experience and how you help a young adult peer to strategically use their self. And so you can integrate storytelling exercises. So I have these based in strategic storytelling, which is a thing as well. It is a practice coming out of our child welfare foster care world, and it's awesome. And you should check out this guidebook, because there's a whole section describing this. And then there's also, at the end of this guidebook, there's additional resources for strategic storytelling. Also, I might suggest, if you have a background in narrative therapies, that's also drawing from that area is super, super helpful. There's an activity on developing an elevator speech. And this is super helpful for you as a supervisor and for your adult peers to just quickly be able to say, like, this is my role in a nutshell. And this will help you to do this, that activity specifically. There's a bunch of storytelling exercises for you to integrate into your practice on a regular basis. And then there's another section on promoting self-care. This section is one that I'm continuing to refine. But it starts out with defining what psychological capital is, which is a super interesting concept that John Dellman introduced me to at the UMass Transition Center, and that it's really your job as a supervisor is to boost this psychological capital, to boost self-efficacy, optimism, perseverance, hopefulness, and resiliency on the job of young adult peer mentors. These are not things that people are born with. These are things we can develop. We can help young people build these on the job. And I like that this is a framework for kind of helping you to think about how self-care could help boost these things. And I also, the practice of self-care that I use, I call practicing resilient self-care. And that includes really evaluating your self-care practices and being thoughtful about the barriers to self-care, and really trying to prevent those barriers from ruining our self-care practices. I also, I'm not a huge fan of the term self-care. I think agencies and supervisors have to be more thoughtful about supporting just, wellness practice on the job. And so although it's framed in self-care, this might move into a general kind of wellness framework of how we can support overall health and wellness and psychological capital on the job There's also sections on how you help young adult peer mentors to think about their natural networks, both professional and peer networks, and how to leverage them and how they can help their clients leverage those. And there's a whole section that really applies cognitive behavioral therapy paradigm to addressing negative on-the-job thinking. And this is coming from directly from my own experience of young adult peer mentors feeling like failures on the job because they really expect to see change in their clients quickly. And we know with working with transition age youth who have a lot of stuff going on across a lot of life domains that you might not see the kind of like mega change that a young adult peer mentor might just be thinking that they're going to see this kind of change and see the impact of their work. And so it's really being thoughtful about preventing burnout within young adult peers and burnout within yourself as well. And finally, and self-care is a process. Is my other thing. This is a theoretical thing, but I think it's important that self-care isn't just something that you say, oh, I'm going to come up with a plan and then I'm done. As a supervisor, you have to be thoughtful of reinforcing every step or stage or phase of self-care and being thoughtful about really coaching and teaching young adult peers about self-care isn't just like coming up with a plan and doing it. It's like talking about it and reflecting on it, like how's it going? How is it not going? But that has to become part of your supervision practice. And finally, there is a section on demonstrating safe professional ethical behavior. Starts out with a commitment letter about what this is an example that you could integrate into your practice when you're hiring young adult peers, what you're asking a young person to commit to in the role. There's a section on confidentiality and what this means and how this is broken into, simpler language for young adult peers to understand so that they can be HIPAA compliant, but also so that confidentiality isn't like, oh my God, I can't share that because someone told me not to. It's interesting how young adult peers and, helping young people understand there's no secrets in our practice. And I go through a lot of this in my webinars that are also on the CBH Knowledge website in the supervision tools section on confidentiality and understanding it, and also bringing it back into your practice as a supervisor regularly. And then also as a supervisor, really assessing agency culture and professionalism and how youth and young adult culture and family culture are integrated into your agency. Super important for shaping the young adult peer mentor role. And also there's a section on effective documentation. This is the second most asked question I get when I am presenting or training on or doing TA on young adult peers is how do we help young people be better documenters? How do we help them use SOAP notes? And so this is a quick and dirty example that you can integrate into coaching young adult peers on how to do a better job of documenting. It looks like this. I like pictures. This looks a little complicated, but take a little bit to look at it. It's helpful. And then I have a short section that will refer you back to the toolkit that John Dahlman and I developed that is super helpful around reasonable accommodations and how that also is a process that is not scary, not complicated, but it is a process and it's a conversation with multiple parties and being really thoughtful about how you can integrate real simple accommodations to help young adult peers be super successful on the job and being thoughtful about those being time limited, that you review those and you figure out if they're working or not. Our toolkit has awesome guidance on that. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel in this guidebook. Here's what the toolkit looks like. You can also access it at the Transition Center's website as well, which is right there. And then I'm just going to quickly highlight, and I'm going to end here in just a moment. I have some reflective questions for y'all to use in your own context. And so during our online learning community call last week, we processed these in real time. We also discussed these vignettes. And I think that these are really helpful for your practice. And if you have other supervisors of young adults in peer roles, to really take some of these vignettes and process them and start to build your knowledge of how you prevent some of what I call the sticky situations on the job with young adult peers. And these are just some ending slides that I used last week rather. And so finally, I'm just going to end with, if you ever have any questions or comments or ideas I blew through this because I really wanted to introduce the supervision guidebook as a tool. I hopefully did not speak super quickly. I think I did though. Sorry about that. But if you want to reach out and contact me, this is a live document. I'm always adding things to it. I really want it to be helpful. And so if you've got questions, you want some technical assistance, we can do that through the Transition Center. You want to learn more about the practice profile that MassDMH developed that is fantastic, let me know. I can connect you to the right people. Otherwise, I think I'm going to end there. Have a great day, and I hope that this is helpful to your work as a supervisor of young adult peer mentors. Thank you.